Alrighty. Hello. Hello. Yep. There. Okay. I was not seeing it there for a second, but oh, they gotta dust myself off. I needed to get this stream done before I left for work. Putting off streaming for too long, and I finally finalized the best and worst list. So
Hey, John.
tell you what, I need an on-air button. I saw a girl DM got one of those for the holidays, and I need one of those. I wouldn't mind one of those as well. Um, yeah, let's hit the Let's turn off the music for right now, and then head on over to the theater room as we talk about the top and bottom 10 of 2021, the best and worst, or as I refer to them, my favorite and least favorite. So, in order to get that started, let's. I made a little something. Deer in Projector Light presents Rowan's 10 favorite movies of 2021. Number 10. Yeah. We got production value going on here. And I need to move my face further up. There we go. That way it's not covering my face when it plays. So, yeah, start off the top with number 10 from my favorite list. I got Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, I know this was a disappointment for a lot of people, but as someone who loved both Skull Island and King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong pretty much gave me exactly what I wanted out of it. It hooked me in from the trailer, and watching it, I had some issues, mainly with what's her name, Millie Bobby Brown's character, and that her whole subplot leading into the revelation of the true big bad, Mecha Godzilla. I'll just say it because it's been almost a year now, but yeah, the Kong and Godzilla fights, the big climactic battle, all of that was perfect for me. It just hit all of the right buttons. And it was only some of the human bits that never quite... It felt like a downgrade from King of the Monsters, whose human parts I actually really got into. And... for some reason, the human characters took a step down, and they really just weren't that good. But the overall movie hit me in all my sweet spots. So, it's not enough to top the list like King of the Monsters did when it came out, but it gave me exactly what I wanted. Let's get back to it. Number 9. Alright, number 9 was the first movie I ever put on the list, and that is a Netflix movie, actually. Netflix picked up this movie called The Dig. The premise is about a woman played by Carey Mulligan, who in Britain has inherited this estate from her late husband, and she eventually finds an ancient archaeological, like one of the discoveries of the century in her backyard. And so she brings in Ray Fiennes to help lead the titular dig into this archaeological site, and then it further digs into the various machinations of like the museum industry or hierarchy and bureaucracy, and how they tried to co-opt and take claim for the discovery, and her failing health, and Ray Fiennes really making this his big, trying to make this his big discovery. It was a really compelling movie, and I know Netflix just buries everything in its deluge of content, but dig this one up. dig this one up over on Netflix. I highly recommend it. I think this really hit the sweet spot for me, or somebody who actually wanted to go into paleontology and never got the chance to. It just hit all the right sweet spots for me. So let's move on to the next one. Number 8 is actually Shang Chi. Marvel's output this year has been overall above board and been very solid. Black Widow notwithstanding, Black Widow's kind of a hot mess, and but everything after Black Widow, I think, managed to be a certain, of a certain quality. We got Loki, Captain America and Winter Soldier, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That show was solid. Hawkeye's been good. What If was overall good. Yeah, we've had some good TV and some good movies here. I liked Eternals. It was an honorable mention until the very end when I finalized the list. And then we got Shang-Chi here. A minor character in the comics. I never really heard of him until the movie was announced. But yeah, in the comics, he's the son of the Mandarin. And so they've reintroduced the Mandarin to the MCU in a more proper way, in a way that's more fitting to his Chinese roots. And instead of being a full-on Fu Manchu stereotype like he used to be, he is a more ruthless sort of dictator and, conqueror. And so we introduce Shang-Chi as his son, and it digs into father-son, trauma issues of abuse and familial, that kind of familial drama. And Shang-Chi himself is a very interesting character, and then this whole movie is steeped in Chinese mythology and culture, and it's a really, really solid movie in its own right. It get a lot of comparisons to Black Panther, and just like Black Panther, the climactic fight at the end is kind of a letdown. Ultimately, it just devolves into superheroes shoot 'em ups, and then it loses all of the interesting stuff that it was building up to, sadly. But overall, it's once again, some of Marvel's best stuff coming out of this phase, and I highly recommend Shang-Chi if you haven't seen it yet. Number 7. Number 7 is Dune. And Dune is an interesting one because it's technically part 1. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but if you know the story of Dune, I'm mainly familiar with it thanks to Dominic Noble's reviews, specifically of the 1980s David Lynch adaptation. And I dig the story of Dune. I think it's hard to adapt. And here, Denis Villeneuve, the director of Arrival and Prisoners, and I think there's this one Jake Gyllenhaal movie early on in his English career called Enemy that I need to see. But Villeneuve is a interesting director, and I think he was a good choice to try to adapt Dune. And what we got here is essentially the build up to the climax of the story, and this first part is mainly the setup. It's kind of like it's technically what The Hobbit should have been in the sense that this is technically part 1. Part 2 is coming up, and that will be the big climax of it all. And so here we have a lot of setup of how Arrakis works, of the dynamics of the politics of this universe, and how House Atreides was set up to fail essentially from the beginning. And the drama between the family in the Atreides family and their relationship with the Empire, and ultimately, and of course, no matter who's playing him, Baron Harkonnen is just a stellar sci-fi villain. He is so phenomenal. And yeah, Dune, I think my problem is I didn't get the whole story, but overall it was just beautiful visuals, excellent use of landscape, and solid special effects and acting all around, and it makes me excited for part two. So we're going to see part two probably later this year, maybe next year. So I'm going to keep my eyes open for that. Number 6. Now, number 6 is No Time to Die. I've been a fan of Bond since I was a kid. My dad and I, because they would often come around November into theaters, my dad and I would go usually with my brother, then later with my nephew, as sort of his birthday present of sorts, is just us going together and enjoying a Bond film. And the Craig series has been interesting. It's been grittier. It's been more down to earth. Whilst later on it's starting to incorporate more of the campiness and more of the over the topness you saw from from Bond, thanks to Roger Moore and the later era Sean Connery, and especially from some of the Pierce Brosnan ones. But overall, the Craig one has tried to stay fairly down to earth. And it ends on an interesting note. If you think about it, the Craig era has actually acted as its own sort of overarching story. You start with Casino Royale, and the event of that, continually show up again and again and recur throughout the rest of the series. And here, Bond is finally put to rest. As this iteration of Bond is literally put to rest, as we are introduced to a new 007 in the form of, what's her name? What is her name? Lashana Lynch. She plays a new 007 who kind of teams up with Bond. They work great together. And the overall story is it wants to end Craig's era of Bond on a good note. And I think it does for the most part. I do think the actual ending of the movie is a bit ham-fisted. It's a bit over the top, even for Bond standards. But that's a minor nitpick to an overall excellent Bond movie and a great end to Craig's time as the character. What they do next, whether they continue on with Lashana Lynch's character as 007 and just do 007 stories, or whether they try to bring back James Bond, reboot him like they did before. We'll have to wait and see what Eon does, but I think Craig's era will probably go down as one of the best of the Bond eras overall. Number 5. Number 5 is A Quiet Place Part 2. This one came out fairly early in the year. I think right around the time the vaccine started dropping, and they were trying to get people to come back to theaters. And I did not expect there to be a second Quiet Place. A Quiet Place was one of my favorite horror movies when it came out. I did not expect a sequel. I did not expect them to return to this world. And the way that Krasinski did helped to build the world in a way that never took away from the first one. It didn't feel cheap. It didn't feel it didn't feel like a cash grab. It felt like he had a genuine idea of what he wanted to do with this story. And he built onto this world, and they especially focused more on Millicent Simmons' character, Reagan. And we get to see the first day of contact with these creatures, followed up with what happened, what happened after the event of the first movie. We're introduced to Cillian Murphy, and he does a great job working off of Millicent Simmons as somebody who, while Krasinski understood her sign language, Cillian Murphy does not, and so his character does not. I think he does understand ASL. He learned it for working on this set, but Yeah, it's really, really solid stuff. Once again, I feel like the ending. There are some minor issues that I had that didn't make it a 5 star. It was like a 9 out of 10 for me. Mainly that I think the son and Emily Blunt's characters kind of got shafted, and I think they got less to do while Reagan is the one doing the main plot. And I think they all and there's some horror movie stupidity, like all of a sudden we have to have something happen, so the characters have to act stupid in order for that course of events to happen. But ultimately, that never takes away from the quality of the movie, and I'm curious to see if they continue it or they finally just leave it here, because they could go either way, and they could also tell stories that are like at the same time as A Quiet Place. They could branch this out and have a whole universe of characters. So we'll have to wait and see. But I like what we got with this sequel, just as good as the original. Number 4. Number 4 is one of the later entries, one of the last entries to join the list, and that's Spider-Man. Spider-Man was really good, and after immediately following the events of Far From Home, we actually get a decent take on the One More Day story. For those who don't know, One More Day was the comic where Joe Quesada and I think it was Brian Michael Bendis, as Joe Quesada was the head of Marvel at the time and the editor-in-chief, essentially, I think, he wanted to get rid of Spider-Man's marriage because he wanted to age down the character and make him more appealing to teens. Despite the fact that, I don't think they really ever had that problem with Superman and Lois, but I guess because Spider-Man has to always perpetually be a teenager, that he can't age and grow and become, all of those years of growth and development as a character have to be undone because Joe Quesada felt like sales were slumping or something. I don't know. It's stupid. But they managed to tell the story in a way by utilizing Doctor Strange in the multiverse that actually makes it interesting. I think the way they handled it, the idea that Peter has to make an actually hard choice, and instead of it being the idea of saving Aunt May from dying by making a deal with essentially Satan, here Peter's trying to undo the revelation that because One More Day spun off of the Civil War comics where Peter's identity was outed as Spider-Man, and then that led to Aunt May getting shot, and Aunt May apparently couldn't be saved by the smartest minds in the Marvel Universe, so Peter had to make a deal with the devil in order to undo Aunt May's dying. Despite the fact that Aunt May was already old and probably going to die at some point anyway. Such a stupid story. I highly recommend Lankara's review of it, his video on it. Or videos. I think it was one of his I think his 200th episode, but they did it way better here, and it's actually a very Peter heavy story in the sense that it leans into Peter's character. The idea that thanks to his Aunt May, his whole goal is to be good, is to do good, and oh no, come on, don't do this to me now, don't do this to me now. Come on. Come on. Come on. Get back up there. Come on. What's wrong? Why is it bad? Why is it bad? Why did the internet go? Come on. No. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Oh no, come on. Come on. What happened? What happened? Okay, I think we're back. That was bad. That was a thing that happened, so my internet just completely crashed or something. Weird. Make sure the chat's connected again. Okay, good. Come on! Why are you being so unstable? What the hell? This is so bizarre. I don't know what happened. I don't know what's happening. Okay. I think we're okay. I think we're okay. I don't know why it just started crashing all of a sudden, but yeah. Anyway, back to what I was saying. That this is very heavy on Peter's, Peter's character, Peter's wanting to help people, and sometimes when you want to help people, there are consequences. And I think this is the most Spider-Man in that regard. Also the most Spider-Man because this is a tribute to the last almost 20 years of Spider-Man movies. This will be the 20th anniversary of the first Raimi Spider-Man movie. And so this is a tribute to all of those into those movies. And I think it's a good tribute to them. It gives Garfield and Maguire another shot at playing these characters again, probably for the last time. And the three Spider-Men work great off of each other. The villains have been improved even. Okay, good. We're back up. Thanks, Stream Elements. Hey, vey. But there's it's a very... I think the highlights are definitely still Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin and as Norman Osborn, and Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. They're fantastic. They're just fantastic. Electro's improved. The only one who doesn't really get to do much is Sandman. Thomas Hayden Church mainly just provides a voice for some reason. Maybe he was busy at the time and he could only provide the voice. Well, whatever the case, I think the villains they chose are great, and I think the interactions they have with each other and Peter are great. I think it's just a fantastic movie. It's definitely top tier of the MCU for sure. But let's keep it going. Move on to the next one before the internet craps out again and I lose the stream. Number three is The King's Man. And this was one of the final entries to the list because I just saw it on New Year's Day, or New Year's Eve, rather. But The King's Man is a great, fantastic movie. Not as good as the first Kingsman movie, but a genuinely great, Matthew Vaughn has found his little niche with this franchise, and it is fantastic. And highly recommended. Jimon Han's Ray Fiennes has been popping up throughout this list, and Jimon Hansu also appeared in he appears twice on this list. Jimon Hansu appears in Quiet Place Part 2. Ray Fiennes is in The Dig, and he is M in No Time to Die. God, my voice is killing me. But here we get a setup for what would become the Kingsman Agency as it deals with the events of World War I. And it utilizes them in a way that works for its whole conspiratorial nature and its secret behind-the-scenes stuff. But ultimately, this is just a father-son drama. This is about a father wanting to protect his son, and the son wanting to go out into the world and be his own man. And it really is a fantastically told story. Its action is phenomenal. It's not as iconic as that first Kingsman. That first Kingsman just boom came out the gate running, and then but it is an improvement over the Golden Circle. I think it manages to improve on where the Golden Circle faltered, and It even has a little hints of them tackling World War II next, and that'll be interesting. But yeah, great supporting cast as well. Rhys Ifans plays Rasputin excellently, and you've got Daniel Bruhl showing up as this German figure who's secretly behind the scenes pushing the Kaiser. It's all fun, and especially if you're familiar with World War I era history, you'll notice so many different references to stuff. It's just a blast, and it's sad that it got kind of buried under Spider-Man towards the end of the year. If you haven't yet, please, and you are a fan of the original Kingsman movie, The Kingsman, I think, will be right up your alley, especially if you're into history. Number two. Number two is The Suicide Squad. One of the only two 5-star movies of this year for me. And I think it's interesting that it was born out of a bunch of angry fanboys trying to essentially cancel James Gunn for something. I think because he spoke out against the Snyderverse or something like that, or he made jokes about it or something. And so there was this weird, these weirdos trying to go after James Gunn and get him fired from Guardians. So he just came over to DC and made the Suicide Squad instead. And then he just immediately got hired back at Marvel to do Guardians 3. So he got both movies. So your little plan not only backfired, but he got a second movie and a new TV show out of it. So eat it, you nerds. But yeah, it's essentially a soft reboot. It takes what was good about that first Suicide Squad movie, namely Amanda Waller and Harley Quinn, and makes so many improvements. Gunn absolutely understands the point of the Suicide Squad. They are losers who are being sent in to die. They're doing suicide missions, and nobody cares about them, and so they have to care about each other ultimately. And Idris Elba is great. He has great repartee with John Cena, who's great. Like, it's wild, the characters it shows. Polka Dot Man, only this time instead of summoning projectile polka dots from his suit, they're actual disease that he spews forth from his body. King Shark with Sylvester Stallone. Even the ultimate villain, when they reveal it, is wild, and you would never think it would work on film, and Gunn made it work. You've got an iconic Justice League villain to the comics fans, but not somebody who is, big to mainstream audiences, and it managed to work for what it was. Ooh, I may have to keep this a best of, because my voice is giving out. And I think I'll have to do a best of and then try to do the worst of tomorrow, just because I'm still worried about the stream crapping out on me after what happened, and I don't want to lose anything else. Not to mention the fact that I'm starting to lose my voice a bit. So at any rate, Suicide Squad is a fantastic movie, and I highly, highly recommend it. And yeah, and I have to check out that Peacemaker series because John Cena was fun, and him continuing that character in this sort of vein sounds like a blast to me. But next up, we got the honorable mentions. So those were my big ones for this year. Before we go into number one, my honorable mentions are Free Guy. I thought Free Guy was fun. It was on the list proper for most of the year until the end. And I will say that Ryan Reynolds carries this. Without Ryan Reynolds, I don't know if this would work. But it also does have fun with the premise of it being in a video game. That said, the subplot with the B plot with the romance, so to speak, is very creepy in actuality. And then Taika Waititi is sadly wasted, I think, as the villain, who doesn't really get to do much of anything. But overall, it was fun. I had fun. Antlers was going to be my first review on TikTok for most of last year, except I kept putting it off. And at this point, I'm just gonna scrap the old reviews and start afresh this year. But Antlers is still a fantastic movie. Great story about addiction, about the state of small town America, about generational abuse and the cycle of violence and victims of abuse. You know, it uses the Wendigo as an allegory for addiction in a way that manages to not be wholly insensitive. I will say it sucks that the only Indigenous actor they got on screen for a major role is just there to say, "Hey, this thing is, we believe in this. Yep, we totally believe in this thing. Yes, we do." And then he never shows up again. And that's my biggest complaint about it. Really, is that I feel like they should have had more Indigenous. Like if the main character was Indigenous instead of, although Jesse Plemons and I think it's Kerry Russell are the siblings, and they're great. They're fantastic. I think having it be an Indigenous brother and sister would make, or having the kid be Indigenous would make it more interesting. But overall, still great horror movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. Ghostbusters Afterlife, I enjoyed despite itself, because this is a nostalgia bomb of the highest order. This is nothing but a big ol' heaping hulk of nostalgia heaped onto you. And that said, it also works as a tribute to the late great Harold Ramis, and it also works as its own story. It's a story about picking up the pieces after your family dies, and it kind of fits given that this is picking up the pieces of the old franchise. And I think the new kids, the girl playing the lead character, essentially the lead kid in this, she's fantastic. And Finn Wolfhard is really standing out on his own. He's getting some great roles for a young actor, and hopefully that sticks into his adulthood, because you're starting to see him grow into an adult, and he's able to work in these roles given to him. And I think he's great as this teen kid who's at first completely he's stuck in a dirt hole town, doesn't care, hates it, and then he tries to make the best of it in his own way, and then finally gets roped into this whole ghost subplot. Well, this whole ghost plot, so to speak. Paul Rudd is fun. I forget who plays the mom, but she is great. But yeah, she's fantastic. And then, it eventually turns into recreating essentially the same plot of the first movie, but in Nowheresville, Kansas, or whatever. And yeah, sadly, it does rely a bit too much on the first movie, but I think it still manages to be a fun ride. It's the best. I think it's the best Ghostbusters we've had in a long time, at least on par with the second, but still beholden to the first. Next up, I have a twofer. I wanted to include both Disney movies on this list because I enjoyed them about the same, and that is Raya and the Last Dragon and Encanto. Now, Encanto's getting a lot more love now that people are starting to see it on Disney+. And I think Raya is just as good. They have their own issues. Raya's biggest problem is that there's too much story for its runtime, and so there's a lot of really good world building, not a lot of great character development, sadly. It feels like a TV series truncated into a movie. That said, it's a really good TV series, and even if it's truncated, it's a really solid movie. I like Raya. I like the world they set up here, and even Awkwafina is really solid in her role. And I do think it sucks that Fang is just forgiven at the end. Both movies have that same problem, where the person causing most of the problems is just forgiven, and then all is forgiven, and then everybody's happy at the end. And I feel like that's a mistake. I feel like that is saying that we should forgive people even if they don't really deserve it. And I but in either case, both movies look gorgeous, fantastically animated, absolutely gorgeous looking movies. And then Encanto has a much better story, but it also has its own little plot holes here and there that are the problem. Namely, once again, the climax kind of forgiving the person who's the real cause of all the problems and just moving on without really any real discussion about it. But the family drama is all fantastic. Mirabelle is a really interesting character. I felt for her a lot throughout this movie, and she even had me tearing up towards the end. But Luisa's great, Isabella, and then all the songs are slowly starting to hook into me. The We Don't Talk About Bruno and Surface Pressure especially, they're really solid songs. And the voice cast is all excellent. John Leguizamo is great as Bruno. Stephanie Beatriz is great as Mirabelle. Yeah, it's a really solid animated movie. Definitely a contender for Best Animated Feature coming up. It's going to be this, and it's going to be Encanto and the next one, for sure. And that one is Luca. It's Luca, and I enjoyed Luca. I don't think it's one of Pixar's best, but I love when they do small, subtle family stories. I think it has a bit of a pacing problem in that it kind of just meanders through the plot and doesn't really have a strict sort of structure to it. It's just kind of lackadaisical. But that doesn't hurt it too much. It's just enough to not make it one of my favorite ones. But yeah, this is a beautiful looking. You get to hang out in like early 20th century Italy, and it's fun and whimsical, and it's and I dug it. Luca's a really solid movie in its own right. Really sweet, something comfortable that you can just plug in. But those are my honorable mentions. Let's end the stream with once we get to it. There it is. Number one. Number one is The Mitchells versus the Machines. This has been the movie to beat all year, and no other movie could do it. Suicide Squad couldn't do it. Kingsman couldn't do it. Spider-Man couldn't do it. The Mitchells versus the Machines was the movie this year that I felt hit me the most, as it's about a would-be content creator who's misunderstood by her family, but her family's their family still loves each other, and even if they don't understand, they still care. And it's like a multimedia collage as a film, and it works so beautifully. Absolutely gorgeous animation, best animation, and it's just fun. It's something that I see myself enjoying for the rest of my life. Probably, it's just that good. Lord and Miller hit it out of the park yet again. And sadly, it just kind of got saddled on the Netflix, and nobody really got to. I don't know how many people got to see it, but please go watch Mitchells versus the Machines. It really is the best animated movie of last year, but it's gonna get buried by Disney either through Pixar or through the animation studio, and it deserves some love. It just deserves so much love. It's so good. So yeah. That was Mitchells versus the Machines, and my voice is giving out, so I better call it there. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks to anybody for tuning in. I gotta tune out, and I gotta watch my voice. See ya.